She wasn't a household name, and she didn't have corporate sponsorships or a press team. But she knew she had to finish what Amelia started. In 1964, Joan Merriam Smith quietly took off from a foggy runway in California, determined to become the first woman to fly solo around the world via Amelia Earhart's original route. She did it in a twin-engine Piper Apache, not a flashy military jet, not a purpose-built aircraft, but a modest, practical plane. Just like Joan, modest, determined, and unshakable. This is not just a story of a flight, it's a story of a dream pursued against all odds and a legacy that was nearly forgotten. Hey everyone, welcome back to This Week in Aviation History right here on AeroExploration. Today we're going to be diving deep into the story of Joan Merriam Smith, a pilot who in 1964 completed an astonishing solo flight around the world, following the same path that Amelia Earhart took. We're going to explore a ton of things about this flight, including how she prepared, the route that she took, and what she faced while she was in the air, and why history nearly forgot her. So strap in and let's take off. Let's learn a little bit more about Joan herself. Joan Merriam was born August 3rd, 1936. A California native, she was barely a toddler when Amelia Earhart disappeared over the Pacific in 1937. As a child, Joan was captivated by Earhart's story. She would devour everything she could about aviation. Biographies, flight manuals, you name it. She would take flight herself and soloed at the age of 15 and earned her pilot certificate by 16. In the 1950s and early 60s, Joan would fly everything that she could get her hands on. Tail draggers, twin engines, seaplanes, you name it. She even took up gliders to fine-tune her stick and rudder skills. But for her, flying was never just a hobby. It was a mission. By her late 20s, Joan began to formulate her biggest goal yet, to finish Amelia's flight. So we get to 1963, and Joan has made the decision not just to fly around the world, but to follow Amelia Earhart's original route, starting and ending in Oakland, California. This wasn't just a common Great Circle route that pilots before her had used for circumnavigation around the globe. So this meant that she'd be flying through some politically unstable regions, across vast areas of ocean, and over some of the most unforgiving terrain on Earth. It would require precise planning, massive logistical coordination, and a deep understanding of international aviation laws. Despite these challenges, Joan was undeterred. She obtained support from the FAA and some other organizations, but she wasn't chasing headlines. She was chasing history. While other pilots at the time were setting speed records or flying way more high-performance aircraft, Joan was preparing for something different altogether. A tribute, a reenactment, and in her mind, a completion. So what aircraft would Joan choose to take on this challenge? Her aircraft of choice was the Piper PA-23 Apache, a light, twin-engine aircraft first introduced in the 1950s. Now, it wasn't built for long-range overwater flights, but it was reliable, simple to maintain, and could be retrofitted for extra fuel capacity. Now, Joan's Apache was specifically modified for this flight. Auxiliary fuel tanks were added, her avionics were upgraded, and she spent hundreds of hours practicing emergency procedures, weight and balance adjustments, and radio protocols. Most importantly, she learned how to fix her aircraft. In remote locations, she wouldn't be able to count on just finding a mechanic. Now imagine flying this plane. There's no autopilot, there's no modern-day GPS, and for various sections of the flight, there's no communication with the ground, while she flies over the Pacific and Indian Oceans and through some other harsh terrain. It's really hard to overstate just how risky this flight was. So on March 17, 1964, Joan departed from the Oakland International Airport on her extraordinary journey. Exactly where Amelia had planned to begin her flight around the world. Her first stop, Tucson, Arizona. And from there, she would travel across the country to Miami and then on to South America. She would fly across the Atlantic to Africa, refueling and then maintaining meticulous logs at every stop. She would land in Dakar and then traverse the Sahara Desert. Then she would cross to India, all the while retracing Earhart's steps with astounding precision. Her goal was to be the first woman to fly solo around the world via the equatorial route, and she did it with no co-pilot, no chase plane, and no major sponsors. So this flight was not without its challenges. Joan faced it all: sandstorms in Africa, fuel shortages in Pakistan, and monsoons over Southeast Asia. In Bangkok, local authorities nearly detained her Apache over some paperwork issues. She slept in her plane more than once and often went days without a proper meal. Navigating by celestial references and radio beacons, she often had to rely on dead reckoning. While flying a leg between Australia and New Guinea, heavy crosswinds forced her to make last-second diversions, flying nearly 200 miles off course to avoid mountainous regions cloaked in clouds. She would manage every leg of her flight herself, checking the oil, inspecting the spark plugs, refueling the aircraft, and maintaining it. Joan faced other challenges along the way that just weren't administrative hurdles or necessarily even related to flying. She had some real risks. In many parts of the world, Joan was the first woman pilot and often the only American that the locals had ever seen. And she was doing it all by herself. So the conclusion of this flight occurs on May 12, 1964. Joan landed back in Oakland, having circled the globe in 56 days. She logged over 27,000 miles and made over 30 stops along the way. While the media briefly covered the feat, it was overshadowed by another female pilot, Jerry Mock, who completed her own circumnavigation via a different route just weeks earlier. Though both women made history, only one received the lion's share of attention. But Joan would never publicly complain about the media disparity. For her, this was about completing a mission and honoring Amelia Earhart. Joan would go on to be recognized by the National Aviation Hall of Fame, the 99s, and even Earhart's family. But in 1965, tragedy struck. Joan Merriam Smith died in a plane crash. She was just 28 years old. Her legacy was nearly lost in the noise of time, and now her story is being told again. Joan Merriam Smith flew not to become famous, but to prove that this route could be done. That a woman flying solo with no fortune or fame could finish what a hero began. And she did it. Thanks so much for joining me on this installment of This Week in Aviation History. If this story inspired you, I'd love it if you could hit that like button, subscribe for more stories like this, and share Joan's story so more people can know what she did. If you have thoughts on Joan's flight, I would love to hear them, so please leave me a comment down below, and let's talk more about Joan's historic flight. Thanks again for joining me, and we will see you next time.